Welcome back to the Haunted Beard, everybody. Thank you for joining me. Today, I want to give you my review and breakdown of the finale of True Detective Night Country. So, I wanted to do this maybe a little bit different than how I've done my previous breakdowns. Given that this is the finale, I'm going to just go through and give what I think are the answers anyways to some of the big questions and mysteries that we've gotten throughout this season. So without further ado, here we go. So the first question is, who killed Annie K? And the answer to that sort of depends on how we are to interpret Clark. So it turns out that the ice cave Annie K was in when she recorded her video before she died actually connects to the Salal research station, and the scientists were mining and searching for some sort of microorganism in the ice that they believe could literally save the world. Only they were, of course, in cahoots with the mining company and were forging the pollutant numbers, and so they were putting out a much higher pollution than was allowed, and it caused all of the birth defects, stillborns, and just all sorts of craziness that happened, visions and things like that people are seeing in town. Annie K found this. She stumbled upon their underground laboratory in the ice cave, and she starts destroying all their work. Now, this is the version of events we get from Clark, and Clark is captured by Danvers and Navarro in the ice caves, and then they finally get him to talk. Now, the thing about this season is there has definitely been an aspect of an unreliable narrator, and so how much of this should we believe? What ends up happening, too, is Clark admits that Annie survived the initial attack by all the scientists, and he ended up choking her to death. Now, is he just trying to shift blame and put the majority of the blame on the scientists, or was it him all along? It seems a little bit of a stretch and a little far-fetched that suddenly all of these scientists would just decide to collectively gang up on and murder a woman. Although I guess I can kind of see it given the fact that they'd be extremely pissed off because she just destroyed 2 years of their work. And we already know that they are somewhat corrupt, being that they've been lying about the pollutant numbers. And so they don't really care all that much about the people in the town, given the fact that they're at least somewhat responsible for the deaths that have occurred due to the pollution. And in addition to that, the flashback that we're given, told by Clark, doesn't exactly match the video evidence that we see from Annie's phone. And so again, there's a bit of an unreliable narrator aspect there. Is that the actual, sequence of events? Is that really how things unfolded? Or is Clark trying to cover? And so given the unreliable narrator aspect, how much can we trust Clark's account of the details surrounding Annie's death? I guess that's up to the viewer to decide. The next question is what about Annie's tongue, and why was there this moving frost, I guess you could say, when Danvers looked at the spot where the tongue was found? And the answer to that is I don't entirely know. It's a bit of a loose end. However, I will say this. Regarding the tongue, at least if we're to believe Clark, he said a police officer came by and took care of the body. Now, I think it's safe to assume that that officer was Hank. Now, did Hank cut out her tongue? Why exactly would he have done that? I don't entirely know. Why would it have just randomly shown up a year later at the Salal research station? Again, I'm not entirely sure. And also, when it comes to the moving frost that Danvers sees where the tongue was, I don't really know that either. And so, kind of some loose ends there. Don't really get a solid, satisfying answer. It's still kind of up in the air. If you have a better answer than me, hit me up down in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts. The next question is, who killed the scientists? And it turns out it was Blair and the rest of the cleaning women, as they found the hidden tunnel that went to the underground ice cave, and they discovered the star-shaped drill bit and formulated the conclusion that the scientists were guilty. Now, this is, I think, kind of the least satisfying answer that we get, because, at least in terms of what we're told, it just seems a bit of a stretch to me that all of a sudden these women, they discover the tunnel. Okay, fair enough. And because they discover a star-shaped drill bit, they therefore conclude that all of the scientists are equally guilty. And so they go about exacting some old-fashioned justice and revenge. And I guess to me, it just seems like a pretty big assumption on their part to just assume that all the scientists are equally guilty. But anyways, that's what happens. So they all show up like an angry mob with guns, shut off the power to the Solal station. They go in there, get all the men out, force them to strip naked and walk out into the blizzard. And then they said that she can have them. They're her problem now. And so we're left with a bit of a natural explanation, but also still some, I guess, ambiguity there for, again, who is her or who is she, and what exactly did she do to the scientists. And I'm going to touch more on that in just a minute. The other issue, though, I had with this is just how it all of a sudden kind of dawns on Danvers to check the hatch for fingerprints is pretty convenient. And of course, the handprint just happens to be in a perfect location where Blair's 2 missing fingers can easily be detected with the black light they got there. And so, yeah, that all seemed a little bit contrived and too convenient. I will say, though, that regarding what happens to the scientists, I do like that they kind of keep it a little bit open-ended and ambiguous regarding the supernatural. And so, yeah, the explanation here behind the scientists is not super satisfying and is probably my least favorite aspect. The next question is, what is the polar bear? And to me, this is another one that's kind of up in the air and a bit ambiguous. It's never really directly addressed. However, my interpretation, or what I think, is that I think it just simply represents sort of the spirit of Danvers's dead child, Holden. In a way, the polar bear has tried to reach out and contact Navarro, and then ultimately Danvers as well. And I think that there is a explanation that it could just simply be a vision or a hallucination that they're both having, again, due to the water pollution. But I think it still leaves the door open for this sort of supernatural explanation as well, as one of the big character arcs in this season involved Danvers and her just internal grief and being so certain that, you know, when you die, you're dead and that's it. And it ends on a bit of a more positive note as she seems to not completely fall into despair and retain some hope at the end of the episode. She goes out onto the ice following Navarro, sees Holden there under the ice and, you know, tries to rescue him. And this kind of whole overall experience, it kind of brings her back to having some faith and some belief and not falling completely into despair. And so I do appreciate that aspect. I thought the character arc with Danvers was handled fairly well. Not great, but pretty good. And so, again, it's still kind of up in the air, though. I could be totally off, but to me, I interpret the polar bear as simply being sort of the spirit of Holden, Danvers' dead kid. The next question is, what is the spiral? And this is answered a little bit in episode 5, where we find out that it is a hunter's warning that people are approaching thin ice, and so we get that. However, there is a little bit more to it. But the thing here that is a little bit disappointing is that the spiral is such a clear connection to season 1, and it's not really implemented or used in the same way whatsoever. It's almost just kind of a visual callback to season 1, and that's really the end of it. I think it could represent a supernatural presence, the quote-unquote she that is referred to throughout this season. But ultimately, I feel like the connection here to season 1 is a little bit unsatisfying and left a little bit more to be desired, especially too because they call out the name Tuttle, which is obviously a big name in season 1 with the cult and everything, and then none of the cult connection is made. There's not really any reference more to it, and so that was a bit of a letdown. The next question is, who is she? And again, this is, I think, a little bit up for interpretation, but we get the speech from Raymond Clark that has another clear connection to season 1 when he says time is a flat circle. And so we're led to believe, at least what I got out of it anyway, that Annie K has been, it seems like, reincarnated to a degree, or she could perhaps just refer to Mother Earth. Either way, there's some sort of supernatural or spiritual presence, and in which case they are seeking revenge, whether it's Annie K's sort of reincarnated spirit seeking the revenge against the scientists, and that's ultimately who she is, who Clark has been having visions of, or if it's just Mother Earth seeking revenge against the scientists as well. It does leave the supernatural element open, which I know a lot of people didn't like the supernatural element with this season. I'm probably in the small minority. I, for the most part, liked it. I liked that they at least tried to sort of expand on that and flesh it out a little bit more. And so I didn't mind the supernatural element overall. And the last question is, what happens to Navarro? And it's another one. Who knows? Not entirely sure. Again, it's kind of ambiguous, open to interpretation. I hope whatever happens to her, she found peace. I think it is very likely she followed in her sister Julia's footsteps. However, depending on how you interpret one of those final images there with her out on the back porch standing next to Danvers, whether or not that was literally her or if it was a ghost, I guess, again, it's just kind of up to interpretation. Overall, while I still did enjoy the season, it did leave some things to be desired, and there's still a handful of loose ends. Not everything really comes together in a satisfying way. I think if they had a couple more episodes to sort of flesh things out, it could have been a little bit better. I know it seems like the majority of people are really, really down on this one and think it's absolutely terrible. I'm not one of them. I by no means think it is great. But I do think that there is some stuff here that works pretty well. I think one of the main issues, though, has to do with expectations. And, you know, all the fan theories are fun to talk about and kind of speculate and try to guess where the story is going to go and what all the answers to the mysteries are. But it seems like the more we kind of participate in this stuff, and I guess I'm guilty too because I've done a breakdown of all 6 episodes of this show, but it seems like the more we kind of get into that stuff, the higher we kind of elevate our own expectations, and we're kind of just setting ourselves up for failure. You know, we want the mystery to go deeper. We want there to be more puzzle pieces. We want more secrets. We want more connections. We want more. And it's almost like you set this unrealistic expectation that the show's just not possibly going to deliver on. I will say, though, I think it was a bad idea ultimately for Night Country to set itself up as a direct sequel or direct connection to season 1. Primary reason is because of all the comparisons that were going to come out to compare this to season 1. And not only is season 1 vastly superior to this, but season 1 is like one of the single greatest seasons of TV ever. And so there's just no possible way this was going to live up to those types of hopes or expectations. And I feel like it kind of started off almost setting itself up for failure in a way by, again, making this a direct sequel or a directly connected to that first season. And so ultimately with this, while there is some loose ends, while some things are definitely a little unsatisfying, it kind of depends how you handle ambiguity and the overall supernatural element to it. And if you can kind of disconnect this season from the first season, it perhaps works a little bit better and just kind of take it at face value as this ultimately a story about, you know, 2 women who are dealing with some demons. And how those, you know, how that internal grief and hopelessness and despair in a lot of ways manifest themselves. And this season showed those types of things to manifest themselves in, you know, supernatural types of ways, which I thought was kind of a cool idea. And they're also kind of wrestling with the idea of, you know, is this life all there is? Is there anything more to this life? Is there life after death? And those struggles are expressed in a supernatural type of way. However, you could also explain them in a natural way by just saying it was, you know, hallucinations due to the water contamination. And so, again, there's a bit of ambiguity there, which I didn't mind. Some elements could have been handled a little bit better. Some things could have been fleshed out more. Some elements were satisfying, others not so much. So it is a bit of a mixed bag. I'm still a little bit more on the positive side. And yeah, anyways, those are my thoughts. Hit me up down below. Like I said, I know it seems like the majority of the opinions out there are pretty negative on this one. But, you know, let me know what you think down below. Let me know what you think of my answers to the mysteries. And if you have anything to add or you thought something totally different than I did, we'd love to hear from you. So that's all I got for you. Thank you so much for watching. If you got something out of this video, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It is all horror and thriller content here on The Haunted Beard. I'd appreciate it, and I'll see you next time on The Haunted Beard.